I ascended to godhood on a Monday, but by Tuesday, the doctors handed me a terminal sentence, stage 4 stomach cancer. I wasn't about to fade away, so I converted my family's failing farm into a massive, breathing biological simulation. I hit the fast forward on existence, praying a hyper-evolved civilization could engineer a miracle before my clock stopped. Their tiny scouts were paralyzed to realize their entire universe was a flat, bordered cage guarded by skyscraper-sized titans. If a culture veered off the path I required, I just hit the reset button and wiped them from existence. I granted their greatest champions a single audience, and they always asked the same thing: how long did creation take? Thinking back to that week on a rusty tractor moving dirt, I'd tell them simply it took exactly 7 days. That often remark gave birth to the myth of a week-long creation while I watched empires rise and rot in the mud. Not a single soul guessed that their entire glorious, violent history started as a lonely laboratory spore in my yard. My name is Julian. I'm fading away in a forgotten corner of upstate New York, surrounded by ghosts and dead trees. I wanted a quiet exit, but everything shifted when I spotted a metallic black beetle hiding in the barn's weeds. It was roughly the size of a baseball, and the moment I touched it, my reality shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. My mind was pulled in a swirling vortex of ancient, cosmic data. Good God, what have I stumbled upon? This was no bug, it was a biological war machine. Swarm matriarch from a dimension far beyond our own understanding. The previous queen died trying to conquer a higher realm, but she left behind one final, desperate secret for me. She realized massive bodies are evolutionary dead ends. The larger you grow, the closer you get to a total standstill. True power, the kind that breaks the laws of physics, thrives only at the most microscopic levels of being. As the new commander of the nest, I held one terrifying gift: the ability to force hyper-accelerated cellular growth. I could drop a single spore and watch it revolve and perish before I could even draw a breath. My heart, which was failing under the weight of the tumors, suddenly thrashed against my ribs with renewed hope. I didn't need a whole planet to save my skin. I had 20 acres of overgrown orchard right in my backyard. I would transform that land into a high-speed lab to force the evolution of a cure for my cancer. This was my one shot, my final Hail Mary against the Reaper, and I had to make every second count. Wired like I'd pounded 10 energy drinks, I fired up my old Ford and tore into town for supplies. I blew my entire life savings on heavy machinery and tools, then hired a crew to level the orchard. I spent hours in the filth, carving out miniature mountain ranges and digging the basins for my new world. After flooding the plot with salt water to create a synthetic sea, I fired up an industrial-grade flamethrower. I scorched every inch of the earth to ensure no local parasites could contaminate my perfect little experiment. I linked my consciousness to the nest and released the first wave of single-celled organisms into the brine. I gave the order that would rewrite history: accelerate cell division 10,000 times over. At that speed, a single day in my yard was equivalent to 10,000 years organizing rapid-fire evolution. For 4 days, the water remained dead. By day 5, the sea transformed into a thick, murky soup of life. Honoring the old queen's final wish, I placed a genetic ceiling on every creature to keep them small. Even the most vicious predators in my sandbox wouldn't grow any larger than a typical house cat. To these tiny beings, my 20-acre lot was a continent as vast and endless as all of North America. By the 6th afternoon, the sea was crawling with complex organisms and vibrant, otherworldly plants. It was like witnessing a time-lapse of the Cambrian explosion. 500 million years of history in a few hours. But as the sun dipped below the trees, the true nightmare began for my little subjects. A 10,000-year day meant they were about to face a 5,000-year night of absolute, bone-chilling darkness. The impact was instant and savage. Without sunlight, the underwater forests withered and vanished by the millions. My first great era ended in a massive, silent extinction that turned the ocean into a literal graveyard. I watched in a cold sweat as the water became a pool of stagnant rot, seemingly stripped of all hope. Just as I was ready to throw in the towel, a faint blue light flickered on the dark surface. A single species survived. I called it blue moon grass. It had learned to thrive on the moonlight alone. Within hours, it had conquered the sea and grew razor-sharp edges to begin its first hunt for meat. A line of man-eaters crawled out of the dark, building a sick world in the shadows. I called this nightmare the Gloom Age. I survived that first long night, but as dawn broke, a second wave of death wiped everything out. The silver-tinted weeds I'd grown didn't stand a chance. They shriveled the moment the sun hit. Everything turned to ash, but by the afternoon, a new freak of nature crawled out of the dirt. This jagged little plant loved the heat, sleeping through the day and blooming only under the stars. It had the sun's rhythm figured out. I labeled this new chapter the Age of Radiance. Once the underwater jungles took off, the sea started pumping out oxygen. That's when the first dark crawlers finally hit the beach. Life had officially stepped onto the big stage. Watching those tiny pioneers claim the land made me want to play God. Evolution was dragging its feet, and I needed intelligent race way faster than nature intended. They needed a push rubbing my bald, post-treatment head. I hopped in the truck and hauled tail to the local zoo. I slipped the ranger $500 for a vial of blood from their biggest silverback gorilla. On the way back, I raided a nest of termites to steal their biological code. Mixing 8 brains with bug muscle felt like a winning hand. Back home, my neighbor Chloe was waiting for me. She saw how skinny I'd gotten and how much hair I'd lost, and she looked ready to lose it. I couldn't deal with her pity right then, so I just locked myself in the workshop. I spent the night in my garage lab, pumping the thinned-out gorilla blood into a new batch of bugs. Their bodies couldn't handle it. Thousands of insects just popped like tiny grenades. After a million duds, only one freak, specimen 2041, actually pulled through, covered in dark plating and fuzzy hair. It looked just like a tiny, terrifying person. When I leaned in, the little monster threw itself at the glass and screamed at the top of its lungs. See chrome dum. I felt the heat rise to my face, nearly losing my mind. I literally built you from scratch, and you spend your first brushing my hairline. I would have squashed him if he wasn't teeth the only one left. I bit my tongue, dubbed them the Crawlerkin, and dropped them into the canyon down south. To speed things up, I cranked the dial until one day equaled a full 100 years for them. I collapsed from exhaustion, but when I finally woke up, everything had changed. The constant birth and death in that little world was actually feeding me, giving me back my life force. My skin cleared up and I started packing on solid muscle again. The best part, my hair grew back thicker and better than ever. It felt like I'd hit the jackpot. Chloe showed up again carrying a warm apple pie. She was stunned by how I looked, probably thinking it was just that final surge of energy people get before they die. I blew her off, grabbed a slice of pie and my optics, and went back to checking on my tiny world. My pulse was pounding. I'd bumped the speed up so high that their world was evolving 10,000 times faster than mine. Monsters the size of alley cats were running the place, while my little crew had only been around for a century and a half. In that savage wilderness, my creations were basically just finger food for the local beasts. These lizard things were stomping my people into the ground. Even though they'd insulted me, I couldn't just watch them go extinct. They were all I had left. If they needed a savior, they were going to get one. I geared up and stepped right into their world. To those little guys, my arrival was basically the end of the world. Every step I took felt like an earthquake, crushing mountains and snapping trees like they were nothing. I turned those predators into a bloody smear before they could even grow, leaving the survivors frozen in terror. They looked up at a massive giant, glowing with light and tall enough to touch the clouds, and they just fell to their knees. One brave little guy stood tall, glaring up at me and demanding to know why I'd left them to rot for so long. I couldn't help but chuckle. "You've got guts, kid." I picked him up, and he stared into my eyes, which looked like twin suns to him, completely overwhelmed by the presence of a god. I shadowed his entire world, my voice booming like a god. "Listen, Gilgamesh. Want to change your fate? I want to save you, but I'll provide the spark. You fix yourselves." I dropped a tiny tree into the center of his dirt valley. To those tiny people, it was a massive pillar reaching for the very heavens. At the peak, I left gifts, including a small steel blade bought from Amazon, a wet match, and some bug poison, the foundation of their entire new world. Steel for war, fire for light, and the vial. If you survive the shift, you will become a titan. Now climb and take what belongs to you. I backed away, twisting the dial until time moved 100 times faster. Everything blurred. I watched the little man lead his tribe through centuries of pain. Generations died on that trunk before one finally reached the highest branches. Grabbing the blade, he promised victory. Their holy book started on that day. Myths spoke of a massive beast from another realm that ripped through reality. It crushed mountains, planted the sacred tree, and gave them a brutal riddle. It handed the throne to their king. Meanwhile, back in my actual life, I washed my socks, mowed the lawn, and ate the lunch Chloe made. Behind the glass, he hid his peak. He used the flame to own shadows. He gutted beasts with steel, planted crops, and even invented his own alphabet. He married 131 women and built a slave state. Kings still rot. 30 minutes for me, a lifetime for him. He slumped on a skin throne. Dying amidst his riches, he reached for that tube of poisonous termite spray. My warning echoed in his head. Only the strong survive the coming change. Am I not the king? He screamed, plunging the needle in his arm. He thrashed in agony but lived. His hair vanished, leaving ghostly white skin. His body turned to stone. Youth returned, bringing the raw power of giants. He smashed his throne with one hand, his eyes glowing with new malice. The good prince, his son, was next in line. He stood zero chance. Gilgamesh stood, gripped the steel, and stepped into the sun to face them. He executed his own flesh and blood publicly. The king has returned. The crown is mine forever. In his second life, he was a hurricane. He hauled a dragon home. It was actually just a dead house cat. The tribe worshipped him. He built a fortress, the first city they'd seen. Scouts returned from the horizon 20 years later. The world was a cage. He gained power, but terror followed. He obsessed over that unbreakable metal blade. It was a material he could grasp. It felt like a noose hanging, a reminder that a god was watching, someone who could crush him instantly. The city flourished, but at 142, death came knocking again. He couldn't have faced the end after being young. He lost his damn mind. Terrified of dying, he forced his whole kingdom to hunt for their creator. The priests drained the land for a cure. They hunted every creature. Extinction. The ecosystem collapsed, eaten by desperate men, but time always gets its way. The king finally snapped. He split the serum between his hairs, dividing nations. A golden era built on terror began then. His heart started to stutter. He wouldn't die. He built a monument so tall it scraped the ceiling. A massive colossus holding a tiny monkey. He knelt there, begging for more. He slumped against the shrine, wailing his heart out to the wise one. I, your servant Gilgamesh, plead for a final word before the dark. Then, cut to me ripping down the street on an Av, destined for a big box store spree. 10 grand evaporated on kitchen tech, power tools, and a commercial-grade sprayer. Looking like some redneck who hit the jackpot, I kicked back and started snacking. A mental ping arrived, his candle was flickering out. Normally, I just let them die. But lately, these primate parasites were pillaging my aquarium just to brew some magic juice. They're basically locusts. Without my intervention, this whole experiment goes south fast. Fixing time, I grunted, locking the simulation's clock to my own pulse. I pulled on my sterile footwear and waded straight into their tiny reality crash. Boom, boom. Each massive stride planted, the earth split wide, their massive metropolis, home to 10 million, began disintegrating into dust. The downtown plaza started shaking like an earthquake hit a Lego set. The legendary ruler was right there, a shriveled mess pleading with stone, fighting for breath. Sensing the massive vibration, a flash of frantic hope pierced his clouded, failing vision. Weeping, he glanced at the skies, the heavens split to show a colossal, godly visage. 100 years, he rattled, source of wisdom, you've actually returned for me. I gazed down at the speck. Generations for his kind were just a lunch break for me. My last memory of him was some arrogant brat practicing swordplay. That was yesterday morning. Well, Gilgamesh, did you have a good run? My words rattled the entire atmosphere. Sonic booms rocked the city. Every soul from the mansions to the slums stood paralyzed. They stared at a 10,000-foot giant glowing like a sun, head lost in the clouds. Trembling, the king leaned on his blade, his eyes alight with a crazy, hungry obsession. I forged this kingdom for you. I won't just be some footnote in history. Give me the godhood. I demand the key to living forever. I stayed silent despite ruling the world. He was absolutely petrified of the Reaper. Truthfully, I understood the desperation. I was hunting for that same escape. A terminal cancer diagnosis changes a person. I exhaled, pitying the miniature monarch. Listen, Gilgamesh, everything expires. That's just how the universe works. I can grant that, and I 1T cheat the system for you, fraud. He screamed, spotting my unaged, healthy appearance. He went ballistic with pure jealousy. He charged at me, his snowy mane flapping wildly in the gale force gusts. If it's not a gift, it's a conquest. Right now, I'm slaying a deity, ripping out his essence and beating time. He shouted to his scribe, get this in the books. Don't miss a syllable. Record this, year 175. Gilgamesh rallies the world to kill God and seize heaven. My pity vanished. He'd murdered his own flesh and blood. Now he was trying to shank his creator. Massive rock carillons started ringing through the streets. Bong, bong, bong. The whole metropolitan area started to go up in flames. Legions of special forces flooded the avenues like an infestation of dark insects. From my perspective, they were just a floor covered in angry bugs. Projectiles hit me like a light drizzle, unable to even snag my denim pants. That's when the king and his partner, the desert queen Ishtar, launched their strike. Leveraging biohacked insect DNA, they leaped 30 feet up like some genetic freak show fleas. They caught hold of my pants and started scurrying up the fabric like madmen. They lunged for my shins, fast for bugs maybe, but to me they were just shadows in the dust. Without a hint of mercy, I swiped a hand, a man-made hurricane crushing the girl like a gnat. She didn't even blink before the red spray hit the air, her body thrown like a ragdoll. I pivoted toward the king. Pure dread filled his eyes as he raised a sliver of steel to save himself. Steel groaned as I swatted him aside, sending him spiraling like a human flare. That 3-foot drop from my waist was a terminal plummet from 10,000 feet for him. Most things would be a smear, but even with shattered bones, they refused to let go. His blade left a tiny scratch on my leg. The realization hit like a freight train. In their world, they were giants. Titans who could scale towers or walk away from wreckage. They had peaked, they were gods, and somehow I had become the villain. You didn't even bleed, he wheezed, drowning in his own lungs with a dark, rattling laugh. I loomed over his broken frame. You ruined this garden and choked the life out of it. You ignored the signs, so now I have to bleach the world white. My voice hit the fleeing crowd like a physical wall of sheer, icy terror. Ruin deletion, the final curtain. He didn't flinch, he just coughed up more red and gave me a haunting, bloody smile. One last favor before I am gone, give me 3 answers. How do you end us? I looked at the muddy waste and whispered, water. I am drowning this whole sick world. A bone-chilling silence swallowed the entire yard. Every breath became a struggle. Only a god, not a monster, could order the floods to rise. Second, he gasped. This world is a perfect square, yet you leave no footprints. Who are you? Why do you care about the balance of life? Because I built this cage, I said, my voice as cold as a winter morning. The beasts, the cities, the dirt. It is all mine. I am your maker. The air turned to ice. The king stared, his mind finally snapping. Suddenly, he broke into a wild, lung-tearing laugh that seemed to mock the heavens. The monster is our father. We tried to kill God. He sobbed through the hysteria. With his last bit of strength, he asked, how long did it take to build our universe? I paused. Digging the pit and hauling the dirt in my pickup had taken exactly 1 week. I told him the truth, 7 days, that is all. That reality crushed his spirit. Every bit of his royal pride evaporated in my shadow. Faced with that scale, his madness faded into a quiet gray fog. He remembered a giant hand from from his youth as he let out one final, rattling breath. He slipped into the dark. Our king is gone. It is over for us. Screams filled the dirt streets. High up, the scribe's hands shook, sweat ruining his robes. He carved the end. God saw the rot in our hearts and called for the cleansing tide. A young boy knelt before me then, holding a blood-soaked sack. My friend's head sat inside. The child looked up, his face a mask of grief. He said his master died rather than fight his creator, begging for a single spark of mercy. Looking at that calm, dead face, I felt a chill. I never wanted a massacre. I gave one last order: build a ship, save 2 of every living thing, survive the storm. Then I walked away from the sandpit. As I grabbed the hose from the shed, 100 years had already passed for them. Their ship was ready. I stood 30 feet back and turned the nozzle to full blast. Crack, the standard hose transformed into a ferocious, blinding torrent. It leveled my miniature backyard empire, erasing tiny civilizations instantly. Microscopic victims drowned while survivors watched their small universe dissolve. I was their vengeful deity. They were just my afternoon chore. A neighbor turned my casual mess into a grand creation myth. That scribbled nonsense eventually birthed a global face entire foundation. I killed the nozzle, ending the fourth epoch's strange inhabitants. They stood zero chance, yet my own transformation had just begun. Electricity flooded my heart, revealing a stranger in the glass. I possessed a cinematic face and marble hard, flawless muscle. Wiping them out upgraded my very soul into elite biological weapon. I leaned in, whispering a final order. The hive mind, nerve-shredding pain struck, and the world vanished into cold blackness. I woke 3 hours later, drenched in a full, dark slime. I was pure Zerg now, a vessel for infinite genetic potential, but the hive refused to let me purge my stomach's rut. Cancer is just internal rebellion, and I was feeding the fire. Every ounce of power only accelerated my inevitable, painful demise. My treatable condition became a terminal death sentence overnight. I need a biological miracle, and I need it right now. The sandbox was a natural evolution would be far too slow. I had to outsource a solution to a world of gamers. I cleared 300 square feet, ignoring the stabbing internal pain. I sculpted landscapes with fire and steel to start fresh. I turned dirt into an alien-powered simulator on a gaming platform. It was billed as the most brutal survival experience ever made. A pro named Max found the 73 gigabyte beast and started. He donned his headset, ready to dominate this new digital realm. He clicked start and found himself trapped in a suffocating void. The only prompt, evolve site to survive. Max sat paralyzed. No tutorials, just endless death until his mind finally snapped. Fueled by rage, he studied advanced genetics to beat the system. 12 hours later, he engineered the perfect biological optic nerve. He burned a tentacled cyclopean horror to finally see the light. He shouted in his headset as the world finally rendered clearly. His nightmare creation crawled toward land, marveling at the hyper-real world. He thought he was a god conquering a masterfully coded program. He claimed the world, oblivious to the giant walking his driveway. Chloe was at my gate, holding a lunchbox and calling. She shouted about barbecue, demanding that I finally open up. I groaned, stood, and headed for the gate. Then I heard it. My heavy boot crushed Max's god tier creation to wet pink mush. Miles away, Max's screen faded to a cold, mocking gray. You died. It was a final, indifferent sentence on his screen. Max's scream tore through the dorm as his mouth shattered. What kind of twisted, Rick-to-lose garbage is this? Come on, devs, show yourselves and face me. I was walking blindly into a disaster when I threw those gates wide. The moment Chloe saw me, she went completely rigid, like a statue. Even with the broad mask on, my otherworldly, peak physique was impossible to ignore. Literal godlike form tempered by 3 apocalyptic fires. Chloe just stood there, paralyzed with shock. She took a jagged breath and hit me with a complete curveball. Julian, she muttered softly, it would be a shame for you to face the end all alone. Let me play the part of your girlfriend for your remaining time. I was speechless, a pretend romance. She just chuckled and gave my shoulder a patronizing little tap. Then the mask fell away. Listen, my reunion is coming up, and you actually look like you have money now. Just come with me. You are on your way out anyway, so that cash in your wallet is pretty much trash, right? Let us hit Macy's for a high-end suit. You should check out in style. Man, the sheer nerve of her was staggering. She viewed me as nothing but a trophy and a human am. After spending hours lugging her bags through the city and burning through hundreds on combat-ready designer clothes, I finally made it back to the peace of my orchard. Sitting near the sandbox, I thought back to that hideous, one-eyed freak I had stepped on earlier that afternoon. It was a mangled, lopsided disaster, one of nature's biggest mistakes, clearly destined for the trash heap of evolution. But the bird nest picked up a signal. That huge, throbbing eye held a terrifying capacity for total mental control. Why the hell not? I tossed the little freak into the main sandbox. The scenery was getting a bit stale anyway. I decided to craft a personalized hell for it, a thick, suffocating, pitch-black mire of stinking mud. It needed to be slimy, brutal, and unnervingly fertile, so I grabbed the handle of my heavy-duty shovel. I marched over to Clue's farm and shamelessly asked her father for a full bucket of raw manure. As I turned that putrid, stinking mess into the sandbox, I felt like a truly merciful creator. To my future subjects, when you smell this soul-killing rot, please do not hold it against your god. If you are looking for someone to blame, find that loudmouth troll Speed Demon on Reddit and curse him. I dropped the evil eye specimen into its new home, and walked away, usually in the wild. Monstrosities with more eyes than brains are the first to go extinct, man. I was dead wrong about this world. Without any predators to stop them, they spread like a plague. Soon the famine turned them into frantic, self-devouring cannibals. From that blood-soaked madness, a true nightmare emerged, the one and only evil eye sovereign. It used mental chains to enslave its own kind, becoming the absolute dictator of the swamp without spilling a drop of blood. The world had restarted after the Great Flood, and now, the first genuine supernatural horror had finally woken up. Back in the real world, I was just a guy with my legs crossed, casually eating an apple. I was flipping through Reddit, totally unaware that my side project was about to go completely nuclear. That variant Spore Evolution, which I had thrown together for just 100 people, was suddenly viral. Speed Demon had posted a massive rant, obsessing over the 100% realistic pain and the sheer misery. He loved the realism, but hated the sadistic difficulty where you cannot save your progress. It was a hardcore death trap. You practically needed to fight in biology just to survive a day. Then I realized the mob was coming for my head. The forums were exploding. They were convinced the giant in the clouds, Meek, was the game's secret ultimate boss. Since they knew they could not win a fair fight, they started dreaming up a truly disgusting assassination plot. They were trying to evolve into a neurotoxic species that looked like, well, waste, highly poisonous, living waste. Their plan was to poison my food so I would die from a fatal case of the runs. I just smirked at the screen. Oh, so you want to play dirty? I started taking notes, logging the name of every single one of those trolls. You do not mess with your creator. I will make sure your next evolution is a living, breathing nightmare. 200 years flashed by inside the sandbox. The surviving worm apes finally emerged to build their own Babylon. The legendary alloy weapons were long gone. They were back to using sticks and rocks. Easy snacks for ancient monsters. Princess Media led 30 of her elite warriors on a hunting trip, but luck was not on their side that day. They wandered right into my toxic swamp. Immediately, the evil eye sovereign reached out with its mind. The men stopped dead, seeing beautiful goddesses where there were only monsters. Their eyes turned blood red as they drooled. They dove headfirst in the filth, offering their flesh as live decoys. Media didn't blink. She was ice. The realization hit. That scrawny creature held the mental firepower they desperately needed to survive. Daybreak came, and she spearheaded the bloodbath with a heart of absolute granite. Trading her whole unit for a win, she skewered the boss core and hauled that disgusting, wrething mess back. To reclaim the glory of old, she played her father like a fiddle and torched the town. 400 women, fueled by pure desperation, chugged that full demon blood without missing a beat. The night erupted in screams as their dinner shattered, turning the place into a butcher shop. Only 3 walked out, Medusa and Cassandra. Caked in filth, they rose with god-tier mental powers. The infamous trio known as the 3 Witches. All of Babylon knelt before its new mystical queens. From my high perch, my chest was pounding, my heart was thumping on pure adrenaline. Magic was finally real, but the stage 4 cancer in my gut was winning. If I let them fumble in the dark, I'd be 6 feet under before they found a cure. I needed to spoon-feed them the dark arts, but there was a massive problem. I was a 10,000-foot in now. One tiny stumble would flatten their world. How could I get in? While I paced, those greedy gamers were plotting my downfall like rats in the walls. I didn't waste time. I pulled the plug on the whole system from the back end. 3 seconds to total blackout. I could almost hear them trashing their setups in a blind rage. I grabbed a shovel, breached the dimensions, and buried a 30-foot plastic pipe from the local store. My secret trapdoor into their reality was finally set. I threw on my headset, built a fresh avatar, and plunged straight into the source code. After hours of hacking, I turned into a 3-eyed crow so damn ugly only a creator could tolerate it. The bird was a wreck, barely flying. But it worked. Piloting this creepy raven, I squeezed through the tube. I glided through the emptiness and popped out into the prehistoric heart of the simulation. With a cocky hop, I headed straight for the center of the Babylonian camp. By the time I reached the pool, the situation was falling apart. 10 years had already passed down here. The 3 witches were at their peak, held in a state of eternal youth by the dark energy in their veins. They were all skinny dipping, but this was some cheap thrill. It was a standoff of the hair trigger. Their mental gifts had turned into a ticking time bomb. One burst of anger and their brain waves would turn any normal guy's head to mush. To keep the peace, Media enforced a strict rule. No witch could ever touch a man. But Circe had broken rank, hooked on the rush. She was secretly draining every soldier dry. Her dark cravings had fueled her power. She was mentally bloated and lethal, planning to topple Media and turn the world into a human cattle farm. Talk time was over. 4 junior witches lunged from the brush, weapons ready to end it. Circe just smirked. She blew a psychic hole in the water, turning the pool into a death trap. Right as the world started to burn, my raggy crow fluttered down and landed on a branch. I let out a dry, mocking chuckle. This is it. This is the best a witch can do. Who's there? The 7 women froze in pure shock. Then they snapped together, launching a massive mental strike. They hit me with enough brain power to drop a mountain. It was a crushing wave of misery. The blast just sank into me like a stone in a lake. Not one feather moved. No surprise there. This crow's head was basically an empty room. You can e-hack a mind that does to exist. I stood there, untouchable. The witches stared at my twisted form, shaking with absolute terror. Ignoring their pride, they stood shivering in the water, looking at me with wide eyes and asked, Are you ga? Swallowing the pride swelling in my throat, I puffed out my chest and spoke with a voice like thunder. I let my voice sink into a raspy growl to sell the con. Call me Herms. I am the sovereign of secrets, sent by the source to reveal forbidden knowledge. I lied effortlessly. I stitched together stoic meditation, mystical energies, and the foundational laws of ancient alchemy. I peddled this mental brew as divine law, suffocating their intellect with dense, fabricated lore. My sermons on metabolic conservation left the virtual sorceresses trembling in wide-eyed adoration. They felt the phantom touch of godhood. I vanished dues before they could even think of questioning me. I simply yanked the power lever from the terminal, forcing a total system crash. My winged avatar dropped like a stone and shattered, a violent exit that left them reeling. To their eyes, it was a holy ascension. The savior had delivered his word and vanished. The masses fell prostrate as my essence supposedly dissolved back into the celestial void. Clutching my lies like scripture, they scrambled to launch a supernatural industrial age. Back in my own skin, I peeled the goggles off and took a shaky breath. Emerging from the steam of the shower, I smirked. The jeers were finally in motion. My life depended on these digital slaves brewing a miracle cure for my terminal cancer. A pounding hit the front gate. Chloe, my current fling, was screaming from the driveway. Julian, the reunion starts in 20 minutes. Are you decent or what? Be right out. I suited up in my best threads and stepped into the night. She had no clue the man beside her had just played God to a whole world. We hopped on our bike. I played the part of the brooding, charismatic boyfriend flawlessly. Leaning against the counter, my hollow but intense gaze completely mesmerized her old enemies. I ensured she owned the room. Once the gala ended, we retreated to a dive bar. Sipping a cold one alone, I heard some college kids yelling at a glowing phone. I looked over. They were hypnotized by a live-stream bioevolution simulation. Some Ivy League snob in a designer hoodie was trashing the current beta group. These guys are brain dead. Every creature they design is a genetic disaster. This requires real scientists, not basement dwellers. His elitism gave me a sudden epiphany. Why do the work myself? I could trick these massive brains into laboring for free. I sprinted home to code a massive update for the version 0.2 patch. I spammed the bullet into every elite tech circle and social hub on the web. 50 spots opened up, but the toll was a 10,000-word dissertation on cellular biology. Every applicant had to prove their design was functionally sound and mathematically perfect. Screw up once and you were exiled. It was a regime of pure intellectual cruelty. The internet melted. Tech giants started claiming I was hiding a massive supercomputing facility. Analysts argued the engine needed the raw power of 3 million high-end rigs to function. Suddenly, a single invite was valued at $100,000 in raw processing equity. I was hailed as a saintly mogul while keys traded for fortunes on the dark web. With prices hitting $20,000, every desperate scholar in the country began hitting books. University libraries were suddenly swarmed with geeks trying to master the mechanics of evolution. Everyone was cramming genetics and history. By dawn, I was sitting on a massive goldmine. My inbox exploded with brilliance, blueprints for organic fighter jets and hyper-efficient apex predators. These were medical-grade schematics, detailing every single link in the genetic chain. Watching this army of unpaid geniuses battle, I smiled like a cold-blooded CEO. Perfect, your intellect belongs to me now. I authorized the system to bridge the gap. A century passed within the program. The witches had finally fixed my broken equations. Under their fanatical guidance, a Neo-Babylonian empire was finally ready to dominate. Magic's high noon was blinding, but every sun eventually sets behind a cold, dark horizon. Circe just snapped. There is nothing more lethal than a goddess with a shattered soul. They preach about being pure, but she was starving for a much filthier kind of power. She kept a secret stash of freakish eyeballs, using them in sick rituals to climb. That depraved rush for a high ended up supercharging her raw, terrifying magical juice. Greedy for the throne, she sold out her sisters and started a cult of blood-red thorns. Her sickness turned my stomach, yet I desperately craved that level of effortless mental talent. I made a cold, split-second call. I was merging my soul with those ancient dark genes. Pain ripped through my body, but I woke up seeing everything, fueled by a billion deaths. Within days, I left the rookies behind, rewriting reality with a single sharp thought. A whole century flew by in my little box. By year 198 of Babylon, Medea and Cassandra, the legends who built this era, finally felt their clocks ticking down. 200 years of playing God had turned their hair to silver and their bones to ash. Leaning on each other, they collapsed in front of the statue they had built in my image. Their voices cracked as they sobbed, mourning the fact that magic could cheat the grave. Their final breath was spent wishing for one last look at the god who stayed silent. Sitting in my rocking chair, my turkey sandwich suddenly tasted like chewing on dry dirt. Watching them fight the inevitable made it real. I was just another man waiting to die. I couldn't fix my own expiration date, but I could give them one hell of a final. I grabbed my watering can and dumped in a bottle of high-end, rose-scented oil. Then I soaked that tiny Babylonian sky with a sweet-smelling, blood-colored mist. Focusing all my new power, I carved their names into a petal and let it fall. I reached for my phone, maxed the volume, and hit play on a classical masterpiece. Beethoven's Fifth exploded through their world like the heavens were being ripped apart. I called time on their era, marking their end with a massive show of cosmic grief. A storm of perfumed blood washed the land as my voice boomed through the clouds. That red rain soaked every street in Babylon, its strange scent sticking to every single soul. I commanded a giant flower to fall, a monument 100 meters tall. The massive blossom dropped like a divine guillotine, signaling the world's heavy, final heartbreak. It leveled the temple, a palace-sized tribute to the two legends who were fading away. That tragic melody of fate became their funeral march, heard for 10,000 miles. The citizens watched the sky scream a song that drowned out the entire world. They felt the weight of their long road from caveman fires to this final, grand bow. Millions hit the dirt, their screams blending into the massive, godly symphony. Their god was finally watching, sending his champions off with honors no human could imagine. Under that red rain, the witches stared up at their massive grave and the holy song. A perfect final smile passed between them. This was a death worth the struggle. They held hands, two legends ready to step into the dark without a single regret. Their fire finally went out, but in the shadows, that rogue sister was still watching. Circe cried through the whole show, vowing from her box to return in another lifetime. I killed the music and finished the oil, closing the book on their story forever. The sandbox was dead quiet, just an empty void waiting for a new disaster. Time to drop in the hard mode monsters the second wave of testers had built. I checked the log of the 10-hour session, expecting to see something noble and grand, but scanning the dev forums, my heart nearly stopped at the unholy freaks they'd created. I scowled while that tryhard Speedman logged 10 brutal hours of non-stop farming. He mixed toxins to mutate a glowing, venomous bird into something like a flaming red phoenix. Naming the beast the Deathbringer, the cycle went live for the whole world to see. The stream title popped up on every screen, be it a launch day one. Watch me poison the fruit-eating giant. The chat went absolutely ballistic with hype. He leaned into the mic, shouting to his fans, "Listen up, guys. The physics here are insane. That monster is just code. Today's program target." I'm doing a suicide run on his lunch with a toxic load to draw first blood. Slumped in my seat, I felt totally numb. I built this entire world for them. I handed them a virtual utopia, yet these bottom feeders spend all day planning my execution. I scoffed, checking my system core about the bird's power. My internal A responded instantly. "It's packed with lethal venom, but your dean makes it nothing more than extra seasoning. Whatever, if they want a crash course in the dangers of ego, I'll gladly deliver." Before I could act, a light knock hit the gate. Chloe was here with my lunch. I stood to open the door, leaving the miniature world on my table for a moment. In the garden weeds, the secret players scrambled. The lunch raid is finally on. The giant is gone. We've got a 4-minute opening. Move out. Troops, stack up, climb the chair. High tier gear goes to the first one at the top. 12 weird players with extra arms rushed forward like a wave of hyperactive ants. They piled high, clawing up my old wooden garden seat with pure, desperate greed. At the peak, the food was missing. Instead, a giant black leather book loom. He's always reading this. It must be the secret heart of the lore. Quit yapping and start pushing. We need to see what's inside this thing right now. They strained against the weight. 12 little fools trying to heave open a massive cover. When the gold-lettered title Genesis caught the light, the tiny raiders stopped dead. Jesus, this isn't a basic builder. Is there a real story behind this world? They frantically rushed to the next page, the age of the deep night. 5,000 years of pitch black where only moon-touched plants rule the quiet void. Then came 5,000 years of fire, the era of light. The first intelligent city rose. King Gilgamesh dared to fight the heavens, so God wiped the world with fire and water. The ink on the last page was still fresh, the golden age of sorcery. A flowery tribute to the dead. Online, hundreds of thousands of viewers went completely silent. Every gamer standing on those massive pages felt a wave of pure, chilling dread. This yard wasn't some game, it was a tomb for empires that died long ago. This terrifying universe had already survived 5 cycles of cosmic chaos and divine ruin. The final boss they were tracking was the architect who wiped the slate clean. She, a piece of the terrifying truth came out, shattering everything the world believed. As the web went into a frenzy, I walked back into view with my takeout. I had no idea they'd raided my notebook or that I was now their god. I sat back on the old wood and opened my meal, ready to eat. Suddenly a sharp prick hit my arm. No more annoying than a summer gnat's landing. I looked down and saw a bunch of weird bugs biting me. I just smirked. A total distraction play. These pros were obvious, wasting lives to grab my attention. While I was looking away, Speedman would slip his toxic bird into my food. It was a smart move, but they missed one detail. I meant not some common target. I dialed the processor to 50, cranking those pest pain feedback into the red. 100% simulates a heart attack. Level 51 to kill, but it triggers a total breakdown and leaves a permanent mental scar. Thud. My hand slammed, cracked, the first pest became an instant crimson smear. Reality hit, the player tore off his gear, flailing like a live wire and screaming bloody murder. Meanwhile, the rest remained clueless, flooding the stream chat with fire emojis. Total gold, this guy's a legend, that performance deserves an Oscar. Talk about commitment. Watch this, I'll outact that death by a mile. A cocky punk lunged, dropping his pain inhibitors to 0. He scrambled up to strike. One my hand flattened him with brutal force. Sweet Jesus, it burns. He shrieked 100 times worse than the last one. That sound made skin crawl, yet the audience roared with laughter and applause. What a pro total theater kid. That death rattle sounded terrifyingly real. Get lost, rookies. I am the silent warrior. Even if he snaps my neck, I won't flinch. A third sacrificial lamb leaped toward me. Snap. God damn it, it hurts. A primal howl tore through the sky. He sounded castrated with a rusty spoon. The survivors finally looked confused. Where's the tough guy act? Is this kid's whole gimmick just shrieking? They still suspected nothing. While they queued for slaughter, Max steered his sentinel into my lunch. It tunneled into the steaming pile of pasta, vanishing beneath the sauce. In the shadows, those players were crying with joy. The trap was set. Choke on it, beast. Poison this boss for good. I picked up the tray and started shoveling. Everyone held their breath, waiting for toxins to hit, but as I touched to the sentinel, I froze. I rubbed my chin, muttering, "Squashing flies took too long. This cheese is cold." Time for a reheat. The players' faces went ghost white, like they'd swallowed gravel. Why so picky, since when do scripted bosses use kitchen appliances? I walked inside, laughing. Eating these digital rats raw was beneath me anyway. Since your poison fails, I'll just cook us up a little surprise. I shoved the tray into the oven, cranking the dial to 500 degrees. The heating coils glowed like the gates of hell. Max tried playing it cool inside the pasta. I'll be fine, he thought. My sliders are 0, heat is just a number. Then the timer dinged. An inhuman howl split the air, far more terrifying than the rest combined. Have mercy, save me, I'm burning alive. I watched, please, these brats needed a reminder of who's boss before plotting my death again. Just as I thought, the little bird was toasted. A haunting, beautiful cry of a mythical beast echoed from the scorching oven. I was floored. 10 minutes in that inferno and the idiot survived and evolved. The system logic chimed in. The first Zerg champion has been forged. Stunned, I yanked the oven door open. In the ruins of my lunch sat a tiny creature wreathed in orange flames, a phoenix. I checked stats. 500 degrees had triggered a total genetic shift. He ascended into a fire species with a broken skill called Eternal Resurgence. Whenever death came knocking, he would just revert to an egg and be reborn. Snagging a legendary beast like that, even without the genetic modding perks, felt like hitting a massive jackpot. I booted every player for a maintenance break and claimed that firebird. I snatched the glowing sprite and threw it straight into the digital abyss as the phoenix took a nosedive toward the dirt. Its unholy heat turned miles of timber into steam, leaving a charred, empty hole in the map. Only one massive stump survived the inferno, becoming a local myth. One deity down, one more to go. I shifted my focus back to the plain, non-mutant drumsticks sitting cold in my lunchbox. I grabbed a wing and bit down. My eyes damn near fell out of my head. It was incredibly juicy. This player really knew how to bait a hook with flavor. He actually engineered a deadly toxin to taste like top-tier sushi just to set me up. I've officially found my permanent Super Bowl snacks. I let out a long, satisfied burp. Meanwhile, in the real world, a player named Max was staring at a frozen screen. Then the notification pinged. Congratulations, Speed Demon, you have unlocked the Reaper Rooster Evolution path. The prize dropped. Reddit absolutely lost its collective mind, naming him the new king of the server. Max's pulse spiked as 3 rewards appeared. He clicked the first option without a second thought. Spawning as a rooster. Sign me up. I am done dragging myself around like a pathetic single-celled organism. Time to build my personal legion, he cackled, tweaking his avatar before jumping back in. Leading a swarm of neon-toxic chicks, he paraded through the world. Then everything started shaking. I was just drifting through the source code and happened to look down at my boots. My gut started growling. Wait, are those not the same spicy wings I just ate for lunch? Late night snack time. I reached down like a titan and snatched up the little morsels. Half of his entire population vanished instantly. Max stood frozen while 500,000 viewers watched live. The sudden silence shattered into a chaotic mess of rip and laughing face emojis in the comments. Talk about brutal. He tried to poison the boss and ended up as a 10-piece bucket. Congrats on becoming a deep-fried disaster. Buddy, hope you like being extra crispy. Anytime I am feeling peckish, he's basically my personal drive-through. Max looked ready to smash his setup. His legendary assassin was nothing but a light snack. The shame was eating him alive. I tuned out the online drama and finished eating to keep the variety going. I logged into a burner to post, why just animals, and has anyone tried the botany tree yet? Be a tree, chill out, live off the sun. That single post sent the hardcore gamers into a frenzy. My garden was thriving. Then I noticed a real powerhouse enter the arena. Username, TechBaron. Identity, Lionel Sterling, some billionaire tech whiz from Silicon Valley. The guy was obsessed with mechanics, turning his character into a living, breathing industrial plant, sprouting 6 fleshy appendages. He was a one-man construction crew, steamrolling through the woods. He constructed a whole town and a bike, but then he got a thirst for real power. He literally brought in his actual employees to build a biological engine within the game's logic. It was a gross, green blob with a massive, throbbing muscle where the engine block should be. You feed it and it fires like a piston. Lionel crammed the thing into a wooden chassis. He floored it. This vegetable-powered nightmare started drifting through the ancient mud. The internet went ballistic. People could not believe what this guy was actually pulling off. The sandbox limits are wild. They basically forced an industrial revolution out of thin air. While everyone was fixated on the vehicle, a dark omen was stretching over the mystical realms. Centuries flew by in the game world. The era of the founding three queens had finally hit its end. That is when Medusa, the shadowy protege, decided it was finally her turn to take the throne. She lurked in the dark corners of Babylon, hoarding secrets until she was powerful enough to strike. She established the Rose Empire, and in 10 short years, the entire world was different. Medusa reached Tier 5 mastery, drenching Babylon's streets in blood with a single gesture. Royal defenses crumbled. Lilith and her 131 kin collapsed beneath the crushing magical weight. Or she spat. Claiming the throne with frozen eyes, she liquefied every dissenter into a crimson mess. To protect her order, Lilith finally yielded. Babylon withered into a vassal state as a twisted, dark era dawned. Men became nothing but reproductive livestock. Each month, 100 males were sent to be harvested by the hags. Lilith's elite sorcerer boyfriend was even snatched for the Empress's private stash. 5 decades passed. Through ritual slaughter, Medusa ascended to the 6th tier. Humanity trembled before the Reaper Empress, a literal death deity. 60 years later, Lilith remained trapped at the 4th rank. Hope withered from my sprawling observation tank. I gripped my throbbing head. These sorceresses were merely leeches, devouring their own tomorrow. Science died as they discarded alchemy. Without those chemical keys, my cancer is fatal. I've waited 60 years. Medusa reigned unchecked. My phoenix was an useless, unhatched brat. Since no legend rises, I will insert a brilliant mind myself. I focused on Lionel, the titan who just cracked the genetic code. Intellect is the ultimate weapon. This mogul was perfect for arcane engineering. Lionel received 3 options, ignored standard buffs and biological upgrades. He picked the gamble, begin a new existence. Reality is stale, he thought. I crave a genuine jolt. Lionel clicked accept, seeing the hook sink in. I grinned. Careful what you wish for. Go trigger a magical renaissance. Once chosen, my interface guided him to a rift between dimensions. The seal guided his gelatinous followers through the abyss. Emerging outside, witnessing the gargantuan flora and mystical beasts, Lionel stood breathless. This was no simulation. It was tangible reality. He assumed his 21st century brilliance would crown him deity. Within hours, however, a group of scarlet witches cornered them. Those witches hungered for the slime's biology. They demanded male essence. Now they possessed potent organisms with the ideal physiology. They pounced, dragging the oozing creatures away from magical milking. Hiding in darkness, Lionel watched his kin turn into hollow remains. The soul became a tomb. The mogul finally broke. To survive intact, he faked death, tunneling into the filth to hide. What hell is this? Lionel's ego crumbled. Once the crones vanished, some resistance casters stumbled upon him. They rescued the Commodus Lionel, treating him like baggage. These 7 outcasts, known as Elizabeth's Coven, sheltered him. While hiding, Lionel discovered a terrifying secret. 3 years had lapsed here. Every tick of the clock felt like forever. He realized one day here equaled 100 years there, nearly breaking his mind. He played the long game for total control. To stay alive, he learned their language and started telling massive lies. He tricked 7 little girls into thinking he was the mythical king destined to kill the cruel emperor. Those gullible kids bought it. They blew all their cash on the precious magic drinks just to help him. They injected him with pure wizard magic, making him a leech. Lionel mastered the art of living off their pain. While those girls worked themselves to death, they spent every night feeding him. Lionel took everything without a second thought. Using tech from the future, he hid in a shack and rebuilt society. 20 years disappeared in a heartbeat. He hit level 4 in secret, packing enough hidden heat to dust anyone who stood in his path. Eventually, the girls were broke. To reach his next form, this tech whiz had to find a wealthier mark. He showed his hand then, using old bones and ancient veins. He built a god out of circuit boards. He made a 10-foot-tall metal goddess that looked like a sci-fi weapon, with his own heart powering the machine. Bolted inside the cockpit, he took the name Grantham and steered his creation straight for the throne. He slipped past the guards and faced Queen Lilith. His strange science left her completely stunned and speechless. Thinking she'd found a hero, Lilith handed over the entire country's gold to satisfy his endless greed. Decades passed. Inside that world, the witch Medusa had turned into a nightmare that crushed every ounce of hope. She enslaved everyone and broke the kingdom. Lilith just sat there, watching her whole world burn to the ground. She was ready to quit, crying for a dead nation, when the sky itself began to scream in agony. The clouds over Babylon split open. Lionel, hidden for 100 years, finally stepped out into the light. He appeared in god-level armor, launching a 300-foot magic warship that looked like a futuristic jet. 10,000 clones of himself worked the engines, moving in perfect rhythm to feed the massive beast. They turned raw movement into a wave of power. The world shook at the mechanical roar of his arrival. That flying fortress, a relic from the future, sliced through the air and targeted the enemy capital. Medusa was fuming with one move. She called up a giant, sky-eating flower to wipe him out for good. A massive, bloody rose threatened the horizon high above. Lionel just watched with a cold, uncaring stare. He gave the order, and 10,000 built-in cannons hummed with pure, lethal, calculated energy. One blast of high-tech magic changed the landscape, shredding that dark flower into a cloud of pittles. The ground broke under his constant bombing. Terrified, Medusa tried a forbidden spell just to stay alive. She ripped open hell to call the spirit of Gilgamesh, the strongest hero from the ancient world. Facing a level 7 legend who fought gods, every mage on Earth felt the weight of total hopelessness. Lionel just hopped off his ship. Inside his mech, he raised a shield and aimed a staff like a god. He crunched the numbers and maxed his power. It wasn't a fight, it was a physics lesson in slaughter. His spell hit like a nuke, turning the field into a boiling sea of rotten, black blood. The legendary ghost vanished instantly. For the first time, the untouchable Medusa finally felt true, freezing terror. Screaming in a panic, she broke her own limits during the massacre and turned into a goddess. Reaching level 7, her strength grew 17 times over. She laughed, thinking she'd finally beaten him. She swore she'd keep him as a pet. Lionel just sighed, totally unimpressed by her weak numbers. He let the mech loose. A basic hit sent the new goddess crashing to Earth, spitting up blood. He killed her in a second. That day, the man who used math for magic changed reality forever. He showed those locals what a real dimension strike felt like. Lionel was the undisputed king now. He built the alchemical empire and buried Medusa alive at the bottom of the deepest, darkest sea. The time of magic died. The world entered a loud new age of industry and cold steel. I sat in my garden eating an apple and watching him play God. I couldn't help but laugh. That smart coward spent 100 years using women as shields, waiting for his moment, a true survivor. But Lionel's win was empty. 100 years had passed. The girls who saved him were turning to dust. Even Lilith was dying. No matter how much science he mastered, he couldn't cheat the Reaper. Seconds were fading fast. To keep his ladies from dying, Lionel rigged up deep freeze pods to halt their clocks. Ignoring his screaming bladder, he ripped the gear off and ditched the digital abyss in a heartbeat. On solid ground, barely a day had passed. This was the same shark who once owned Wall Street. He bolted from the bathroom, looking wrecked. He ghosted a massive merger just to hunt for digital answers. He spammed social media with a frantic so's. After a century of grinding, he finally claimed the throne. But his 7 queens were aging out. Could modern biotech save them? He sat there staring, desperate for help. The stakes were high. Online people figured this tech tycoon had finally snapped and gone off the deep end. The trolls were brutal, calling him a loon. Lionel didn't argue. He just dropped the impossible receipts right then. He uploaded ultra-crisp evidence. He showed off the ancient ruins and the sprawling magic empires he now governed. There were hags on beasts and sky-ripping spells. Then that hauntingly beautiful shot of the flower of death. The mockery stopped cold. A heavy, eerie hush swept across the entire web from one corner to the other. Then Lionel hit them with a truth bomb. You really think I was only playing for 24 hours? Wrong. One day here is a century there. I have literally lived a second life for 100 years. That single update broke the internet. It was like tossing a massive rock into a perfectly still, glassy pond. Like a nuke going off, the web erupted. The trolls who mocked his brain just shut their mouths. They gawked at the photoreal vistas and his massive encyclopedia on alien medicine he had painstakingly written. Quiet turned into total hysteria. If real-world science worked there, the stakes were suddenly terrifying for everyone. To save those 7 dying ladies, med students across America felt a massive rush of fire in their blood. A never-retreat vibe triggered a crazy research frenzy that took over every social feed in the country. From Hopkins to Harvard, libraries were slammed with kids hunting down those exact cures for the virtual world. Even news anchors were floored. A simple evolution game was making Ivy Leaguers master gene hacking overnight. Meanwhile, I sat in my yard nursing a cheap soda I snagged for $5 at the local store. I sat there watching the digital world burn with a massive, satisfied smirk on my face. These pro gamers weren't just playing, they were basically hiring the planet as top doctors to be my backup. My terminal diagnosis finally had a prayer, so while the buzz was hot, I upped the ante. I opened 30 fresh spots on Steam. The rule was basic: give me medical results or get the boot. I forced them to pump out biology papers just to keep their access, and it actually worked. I even found a way to drag Chloe, my pretend better half, into the middle of this digital storm. While I kicked back, Lionel went under again after his big viral moment. He jumped back into the fray. The veteran shark returned as the alchemy king, realizing that total power is just a big, lonely weight. He rallied his nation to build a flying fortress, taking his magic-wielding advisors up into the blue. They climbed toward 100,000 feet, searching for the legend where the old gods supposedly lived. My heart stopped as I watched the screen. You cocky Silicon Valley jerk, done to go snooping around up there. Instead of curing my sickness, he was chasing phantoms. Above him was just the metal roof of my shed. There was no paradise, just a ceiling. My massive lie was seconds away from being exposed to the world. I bolted to the garage and grabbed my heavy-duty shop fan. I jammed it in, heart pounding. I pointed the air at a gap in the sandbox sky, set it to low, and muttered, "Let there be a holy gale to strike down any mortal who thinks they can touch the stars." Up on his sky mansion, Lionel didn't to flinch. He felt the force and just started laughing. Seeing that invisible cyclone rip through the clouds, he was scared. He was absolutely ecstatic. He hollered in triumph, claiming he had finally found the secret entrance to the Holy Land. Suited up in level 7 power armor, he clutched his staff like a heavy-hitting cinematic titan. He looked like a total superhero as he dove off the deck into that screaming, powerful wind. It was just a floor fan, but it could rip through a book. Lionel fought it head-on. He piled up his magical barriers, dead set on smashing through to finally meet his maker. Piling on every defense, he ground his teeth and crawled forward. "Nothing here stops me, not even the stars," Lionel screamed. "Oh, really? That's..." I smirked, grabbed the dial, and clicked it to 5. Boom. A Category 4 storm screamed like a ghost. That who swore he owned destiny was slapped from the sky like a fly, plummeting toward the mud like a broken toy. Terrified witches scrambled to catch their shattered lord, the once godly conqueror who had steamrolled every soul in this little world. Soaked in red, he stared at the sky, his pride completely turned to dust. "I thought I was divine. I'm me, just a pathetic los." Darkness filled his eyes. He fled, swearing to avoid the sky until level 8. When he quit, I sighed and flipped the kill switch. That heavy fan kills my power and the electric bills hurt. Still, I felt cold. Right now, a level 6 bug barely flinches at a hurricane. At level 8, a kid with a twig could flatten New York. Could I, their god, still stop them? I needed a plan. Once he left, I biked out for some milk. Opening the gate, I walked into a total riot. The plant folks had literally unrooted and were sprinting away, dripping mud. "Run, boys. The master home, stop pushing. Watch the vines, jerk. You stole my sunning spot. I'll skin your bark." 2 trees fought over dirt until one threw a bomb fruit and spat venom. Holding my bags, the weeds dove into the earth, posing as innocent garden flowers. I laughed. These weirdos are getting way too cocky. Inside, I checked Reddit for the gossip. The moment I loaded it, I froze. Some nerd named Max alias Speed Demon posted a 10,000-word theory, linking those ancient scrolls to real-world science in my private diary. He debuilt a rock-solid case. Listen, the yard isn't the start. We were totally off. This is the cosmic forge where the maker builds life. That guy eating, he's the supreme god of everything. We're just his planted seeds. If we grow, he puts us into new galaxies. My Reaper Rooster is now their chief god. The whole board just went wild. The lore was incredible. I just sat there, totally stunned. A multiverse, a divine nursery. I'm just a dying guy growing apples in New York. These corporate suckers I was using actually dreamed up a holy crusade. The more they obsessed, the more they begged for 20-hour unpaid shifts. I nearly died. If they want pain, fine. Suddenly, the Reddit thread's mood shifted. All kill plots vanished. They had all become religious nukecases. Half swore loyalty. The rest wanted to be eaten to boost their stats. I used a fake account to stir the pot. Hey, God's favorite snack is the Reaper Rooster. That did the trick. Online, Max logged on to find a mob of plants with glowing eyes. Grab him, present him to the architect, chop the head. Honestly, it tastes just like poultry. Flawlessly toasted and brittle, poor Max never even squeaked before his lights went out. She abducted by synthetic nymphs. He was stripped and staked out like some pagan offering. I approached that featherless omen of doom with a smirk. Well, last time is a nuked roast. Tonight it is deep fried, pure, unadulterated excellence. I waded through piles of test applications, fully expecting to skim the usual garbage, but 2 elite entries flagged by the system stunned me. Even gods feel wonder. One was a biological thesis from a 28-year-old genius, a creature all mouth, no veins. Its frame expands like hardened alloy as it feeds. This is industrial-grade survival. Good lord, it is sentient iron. Who needs mines when you can farm monsters? It is mechanized progress on legs. However, the second document completely shattered my mind. Titled Project Synthetic Divinity, devouring those pages felt like a feverish hallucination. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I had been agonizing over a sky-high paradise. This lunatic wanted hundreds of players to merge ships into a mile-long, conscious citadel. My celestial empire finally solved, self-sustaining workers who labor until they are spent. The plan was simply too flawless. I did not hesitate for a single second. I opened 50 new invites, ready to drain these newbies for every drop of effort. I surveyed the realm 100 years since I annihilated Lionel for his hubris. A century later, the mystic monarch who digitized sorcery was finally withering away. At 221, the patriarch was dying. He ended bondage and kept order. He forged a fair society, yet mercy is frequently met with a cold blade. Masses submit to dictators, but betray the leader who shows them true grace. Vultures were closing in. Zealots were already conspiring to resurrect the ancient Medusa. While cultists hunted the monster, the crossbreeds he rescued prepared for betrayal. They viewed his demise as their promotion, a truly demonic alliance. They attacked during his decline. Flowers fell upon a throne room slick with perfidy. Ermin arrived for a briefing, but 7 assassins were already waiting to strike. Rank. 13 hexes shredded his defenses effortlessly. His machinery collapsed into ruins and bone. The realm burned immediately. The capital wailed as flames licked the night sky. Amidst the debris, a fading ooze used the bedlam to slink into obscurity. He slumped in a gutter. Outside the simulation, Lionel jerked his visor off, choking. Eyes red and frantic, he lunged for social media to beg for assistance. Help! My sovereign was just betrayed. My primary character is dying in the streets. If players spot me, I am toast. I am currently just a helpless glob. What is the move? Someone assist? This is a total critical crisis. The web erupted. Watching a tech mogul down over pixels was gold. Hecklers suggested finalizing his estate. Others teased about him becoming an appetizer. Then the experts intervened. A global virtual extraction effort was launched. Ivy League medical students stayed up studying his strange and game molecular data. They crafted a curative tonic using that rare avian essence he had collected. It was a total biological overhaul. Eternal vitality stored in a digital vial. The remedy existed, but Lionel's consciousness remained lost in the void. A specialist intervened, manually trigger your psyche to reboot the virtual body. A desperate gamble, Lionel donned his equipment, muttering, "Open your damn eyes." Complete obscurity. Suddenly, his vision cleared. Ermin was staring directly at him. I was ready to beg for a miracle when a stranger stepped from the shadows to stop me. Suddenly, the digital world screamed a warning from a historian who saw the blood on my future. Stay away from the capital. He pleaded, your own generals are the ones who sold your soul. Returning home was a death sentence. So I used every mental trick I knew to flip the script. I lied to my companion, claiming I was the Emperor's shadow, and we bolted for the hidden vault. Our frantic escape went viral, turning into a massive, live-streamed hunt that the whole world watched. People at home used satellite maps to steer us through the most lethal parts of the wilderness. When the killers caught up, retired war heroes joined the chat to talk me through the slaughter. Through all the fire, her cold steel and beauty turned her into a global icon for the masses. It was the ultimate survival game, where 6 years passed for us while Earth only aged 1 hour. We finally cracked the mountain's heart and stepped into a tomb filled with forgotten imperial treasures. I mixed a cocktail of firebird blood and ancient weeds, then choked down the burning liquid. My body shattered and fused in a cycle of white-hot agony as I melted into something new. When the fire died, I stood there reborn, my youth restored, and my strength completely off the charts. Fusing with death itself, I grew wings of light, becoming a beautiful, lethal monster with a god's face. The internet absolutely melted when I showed them the transformation, with millions of fans losing their minds. Armed with new power, I raided the vault to build 2 10-foot-tall suits of mechanical death. 12 years had gone by, and the rats who stole my throne thought I was long gone. The traitors were too busy fighting over the scraps of my kingdom to see the storm coming. Everything changed when 2 massive steel gods dropped from the clouds and slammed into the palace dirt. We stood at the gates, our presence radiating the kind of power that made the air heavy. I looked young, dangerous, and ready for war, and the crowd's fear turned into a deafening cheer. People wept in the streets as the word spread, the king has cheated death and come home. Back from the grave and thirsty for blood, didn't he just rush in to kill them all? I stood tall in my iron shell, my cold gaze cutting through the city as I gave them a choice. You have 72 hours. I told the world, every traitor better crawl here and beg for their life. When that message hit the forums, the entire web went into a state of pure, chaotic hype. What an absolute legend, the fans wrote. The king is finally back to take out the trash. My return was a psychological hammer that broke the spirit of every rebel left in the world. No matter how much they hated me, they knew they could win against a god who refused to die. One after another, they dragged themselves to the palace steps to kiss the dirt at my feet. Even the terrifying queen of the deep sea sent word that she was hiding in the abyss. I want he touch the shore as long as he lives, she promised, and finally the world went quiet. I kept my old promises and threw a massive royal wedding for the 7 women who stayed loyal. Centuries blurred together as my serums kept me alive until my 400th year on the throne. I became a living ghost story, but my queens did share my gift for outrunning the Reaper. Despite all my medicine, they all slipped away after 2 centuries, leaving me alone in my house. I buried my massive flying fortress deep underground to serve as a tomb for my lost loves. With my heart gone, my only goal was to outlive the Sea Queen and find someone worthy. How is that monster still breathing? I growled from my golden chair, feeling the weight of years. I felt my own clock finally winding down, and the old anxiety of the end started biting. Thousands of miles away, she was thinking the same thing. When will that thief finally just die? By the year 804, this 500-year-old king finally reached the end of the line. I handed my crown to my oldest friend and walked in the ancient shadows to find peace. Looking at the stars, I remembered everything, from being a puddle of slime to ruling the entire world. The old-timer just craved a sign from above, so I tossed him a bone while relaxing under my apple tree. He was a total glory hound, but his architect skills were unmatched, forcing me to hijack the hive mind's controls. I manifested a radiant ghost bird to fly down, murmuring that his alchemical legacy would endure forever. He passed away with a serene grin, yet the moment his death hit the headlines, the world descended into chaos. Every sorcerer in the land was devastated, and even his lifelong nemesis Medusa felt the crushing blow. Deep in her sunken palace, she poured a glass of vintage red, toasted to his transparent, noble journey. She vowed to lock her gates for 100 days in tribute, completely blind to the actual situation. In a Beverly Hills bathroom, Lionel ripped off his vergear, his skin buzzing from a massive psychic surge. To him, 80 years had flashed by in an instant, but while he was dreaming, I was back in my grove. My nerves were fried as I watched the secondary processor catch pings from global intelligence agencies. Good grief, the most dangerous rogue states on the planet were trying to invade my little homegrown experiment. They saw Lionel's high-def leaks and lost it, certain they'd discovered a gateway to some higher realm. The CIA, Mi-6, and the Fab were already building coverkers to analyze bunkers, what they mistook for alien life. They even planted top-tier spies into my third beta run, dreaming of stealing tech for a space colony. These idiots wanted to annex a digital world into their borders, and I just wanted them off my property. I'd sunk every penny into this New York farm, and now these vultures were circling my backyard, invading my pet ants. I almost kicked them out, but then I saw a better way to exploit them. Why not turn these arrogant nations into my free workforce? Meanwhile, the beta testers were cooking up pure insanity. 173 psychos were engineering a nightmare that would terrify a creator, Project Artificial Horror. These lunatics constructed a massive wooden vessel, then collectively restarted their lives as parasitic organisms. They infested the timber, and as the wood decayed, those players transformed into a mess of bone and muscle. They merged into a 20,000-foot beast that literally clawed at the sky toward my chest. It was a cosmic freak show with no core mind, just a screaming chorus of 173 fools. The system flagged it as a Thulhu tier mess with 4 broken perks that put a Zerg hero to shame. It featured a terrifying silhouette, soul swapping, and the power to grow back from a single drop of blood. It was practically deathless. Even if shattered, they would just snap back together like plastic building blocks. Backed by their new flesh titan, the players started acting out, trashing the world and talking big. They were bragging on Reddit about breaking out of the simulation to sit on my porch and take over. They really think they can take my chair. I guess they haven't had a reality check in a while. I deleted their permanent rewards from the database and grinned as I popped the portal notification. Realizing they were cornered, the players began howling in the voice chat, ready to jump into the void. They figured they'd just hunt down the goddess Ermin and burn her world to the ground instead. The 4th scourge had arrived, just as the real-world spies and scientists were hitting a breaking point. They believed they were entering a wormhole to lead the human race into an age of cosmic empire. I decided to let them try, letting the 4th scourge bring the heat to Medusa now that her guard was down. Chuckling, I cracked open the plastic pipe that connected my 2 little terrariums together. A sci-fi thriller starring master spies and total idiots was about to erupt in my garden. But the second the prompt appeared, the players inside the Colossus froze as a massive glitch popped up. The software warned that their biological monstrosity was far too huge to pass through the world's exit. My 20-acre lot only had a tiny drainage pipe, and they were trying to ram a 3-mile Titan through it. Still, never count out the twisted logic of a gamer obsessed with breaking the game's physics. Since the whole thing would T-fit, they decided to gut it, screaming while they ripped their own creation apart. They broke their masterpiece into a million shards and began sliding through the pipe one by one. They intended to regroup on the other side, while the tension in those secret labs reached a boiling point. Experts at the CIA and FESP stared at their screens, finally grasping that the time flow here was totally insane. Time works differently here. One single day spans an entire century. Controlling this rift means launching a civilization 1,000 years ahead of the global tech race. To seize control, top-tier ghosts from every major power have already infiltrated the inner circle of the 13 protectors. They are the ones pulling the strings. It is a cutthroat game of shadows where everyone is fighting to be the sole pilot. But a tiny glitch slipped past their sensors. A socially stunted genius from MIT, Penny Parker, a savant in biological engineering, breached the gap accompanied by a swarm of jagged red and black drones. Do not mistake her for a hero. She lives for the villains and has no desire to play nice with the righteous. She is on a rescue mission. She is here to break out the Dark Witch Charlotte and steamroll the 173 fools playing hero. You people can keep your justice. I am the bad guy, and I'm going to dismantle all of you by myself. Adopting the name Pandora, she prepared to crack the world open. Meanwhile, the reality below was hitting the reset button. The Empress of Death, Medusa, made a bloody return to power. With a few lethal strikes, she seized back her crown. She crushed her rivals and dragged Babylon back into a waking nightmare ruled by the darkest sorcery. But before she could even settle on her throne, a terrifying report arrived from the front. The scouts sent into the wasteland were returning in body bags, their brains turned to liquid and blood leaking from their eyes. Even a high-ranking witch lost her mind after one glimpse. Skeptical, Medusa forcibly extracted the memories from the woman's shattered psyche. All she saw was a throbbing, impossible mountain composed of screaming raw tissue. It radiated chaotic, otherworldly hum design dissolved the very essence of a human soul. Look at that beauty, she is actually not bad looking at all. Hey there, gorgeous. Wait, what is going on with her? Why is she spitting blood and losing her mind? Are we that ugly? This is definitely because of Speed Demon's garbage avatar design. Forget it, boys. Let us head into the dunes and hunt down that phoenix. We will bleed the bird dry as a tribute for the goddess. Hearing those moronic gamer voices, Medusa nearly died of sheer fright. She coughed up blood, her pupils blown wide with a terror that she could not even name. You cannot look at it, you cannot hear, you cannot hope to comprehend what it is. Is this a god? No. It is a walking extinction event coming to butcher a newborn deity. Fearing for her very existence, Medusa shrieked out one final, desperate command. Every witch must wear a blindfold and plug their ears immediately. Avert your eyes from the horror, or your mind will burn. So, when the players arrived to regroup, they found an entire kingdom of people acting stone deaf and blind. What the hell, are we so hideous that these people will not even look in our direction? My ego is totally trashed. Somebody find Speed Demon and give him a piece of our minds. Medusa was completely unraveling. She formed an uneasy pact with her enemy, and they ran for their lives. They cowered in the Temple of Wisdom, praying to me, their architect, for some kind of divine miracle. I decided to put on a show. I grabbed my $2,000 drone from the garage and got it ready. I glued some glowing LED strips to the frame and sent it hovering over their miniature world. I cranked the speakers to the max and switched on my deep, booming voice of doom. You mortals, did you think you were alone? The heavens are currently a graveyard for the old gods. An ancient terror has breached reality to execute your infant phoenix deity before it even wakes. My deception worked perfectly. They trembled with fear while the 20,000-foot titan leveled the mountains outside. The players, drunk on phoenix blood, looked up and spotted my glowing plastic toy in the clouds. Hey look, a floating island. Must be a local deity coming for a scrap. Who cares, we just wrecked a phoenix. We are the gods now, quit being cowards, let us go take him down. Those brutes did not even bother with magic, they just reached down and gripped a massive mountain peak. They hurled the entire mountain to my $2,000 drone. Back in my yard, I started to panic. I pulled a sharp bank, sweating bullets as I dodged the flying debris. You little shits, you want to break my new toy. Fine, if you want to play God, let us see how you handle the real deal. Listen, quit hating because I killed the power. Wiping out those vermin was easy. Grinning, I hit the override. Everyone everywhere just blinked out. Seconds later, the searing glow vanished and the howling air went silent. 173 wannabe heroes froze mid-poos as the world went dark, signals severed. A crash, that massive titan, now pilotless, turned into nothing but a heap of carrion. Skeleton and sinew simply dissolved, raining down like a localized monsoon of fresh blood. The impact felt like the literal end. Medusa and Ermin, watching the slaughter unfold, were paralyzed by the sudden silence. Forget mana or casting times. The wise one simply deleted that nightmare from reality. Was this true godhood? I kept the act going over the speakers. Focus up. It is only dormant. Shred it with forbidden arts before it manages to stitch back. Both fighters snapped out of it. They called in the mages to conjure a massive gale, whisking those bloody scraps to the map's edge. That is how the saga of the Golden Witch became etched into history forever. A dark deity descended, bringing misery to everyone until the sage broke it, leaving the shards to decay. Back online, the forums were melting. Wait, a total reset after the intro level. This title is garbage. That boss did not even telegraph. Just a straight one-shot kill. Show your face, Speed Demon, you backstabber. We are going to sacrifice you to the heavens. After the initial rage, they realized they were not dead. The reality was much worse. Their actual guts were scattered everywhere. The ultimate online sob fest kicked off immediately. Help, I just respawned as a piece of paper. Now some blonde villager is scrawling on me with a quill. You think you have it rough? My scalp is fused to some bird's head like a weird growth. Get in line, a massive beast is chewing on my femur like a toy. It won't stop licking. I keep trying to run, but it just retrieves me, please. Someone help. Tiger Cub drew the shortest straw, getting turned into a page in a grimoire. This girl named Linda opened him. Trying to be friendly, his translator glitch. Hey babe, let us get together tonight. Linda shrieked and bolted. Convinced he was cursed, he scrambled to fix it. But the A output, hey beautiful, why do you not rub me softly? Game over. Linda completely lost it and passed out on the floor. That creepy book scarred her for life. I watched the forum users cry while stroking my chin. I could not fake being a god forever. I needed some actual muscle. I accessed Penny's den and started tinkering, morphing raw metal into complex gears. I built this red and black avian freak, roughly basin-sized, and tossed it into the mixed speculation, limitless growth, and cellular rebirth. My top-tier enforcer, a chills, was finally online. I considered an army, but the system warned that micromanaging 17,000 cells would fry my brain. I will launch a magic school simulator, con these players into being my code monkeys, and grind. Back on the surface, the true slaughter began, a group of witches down to jungle beast. While departing, amidst the laughing, raw, pulsing tendrils slithered from the bark and burrowed into the carcass. That corpse suddenly snapped its eyes open and rose, ready for the kill. I pivoted my bulk, unloading a series of lethal, bone-crunching strikes. Raw power shredded the atmosphere. This vessel's tactical instincts are top tier. A disciplined giant can TB stop him, the Phantom pilot, ex-Navy SEAL. Name's Jack Ghost Richardson. I watched the online trolls suffer a jagged smirk appearing. That 100-foot crush was intentional. MI6 and the FSOB have arrived. They're body snatching and slaughtering locals to claim this titan for their country. Controlling this realm grants a 1,000-year advantage. The global massacre starts now. I'm lagging behind the foreign agents. I only secured a 20-foot monster for myself. It'll work. I'll stack bodies until I'm steering a 300-foot god. I'll raid those mystic citadels, loot their serums, and endure the rituals for strength. I charged my massive weight, shredding the woods like a wrecking ball. Suddenly a 40-foot freak squared me up. I dropped low, ready for war, leaking venom